Last week, I was watching a panel discussion on emotional intelligence, and basically in the time of the coronavirus. And on the panel was serial entrepreneur and CEO Sean McDermott. Sean runs a company called Windward Consulting, another company called Monocle. He's been an entrepreneur for a long, long time. He has a foundation called Windward Foundation that helps and is focused on people who support Alzheimer's victims, Alzheimer's caregivers. He's a pillar of the community. Very interesting guy. He's father of three girls. He's an artist, really kind of a Renaissance guy. And I was listening to him talk on the panel, and my partner was listening to me listen and walked over and was really comforted by what Sean was saying. So I called Sean up and I said, hey, would you mind coming on the podcast and sharing some of that wisdom? And Sean was like, I was just being myself. I was just talking about things that I deal with. But if you want that, that'd be great. We can be on the show. So Sean, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So you and I were talking about the things that you have to deal with as a CEO, as a dad, right? As someone who's running a philanthropic organization, and you have to find yourself, your leadership, your internal leadership skills in so many different areas. So at a time when the world seems to be falling apart and people are having difficulty really managing their emotions and their things, you seem to be able to shore yourself up pretty well. How are you mustering yourself in this time when you have all these plates that you're spinning and trying to keep sane?
Well, the first thing I'm doing is I'm trying to take care of myself. I just put out a post the other day, just like one of the pillars of what I'm trying to do is just take care of myself. And it's sort of that whole idea of put your mask on first and then help others. So I've been self-quarantined for 10 days already. And
so you took this seriously from the get-go?
Oh, I took it seriously from the get-go. And the option of me getting sick is just not an option. So, and that's fine. And I've kind of rebuilt my entire office at home now. And I've started creating some routines in my day. I get up in the morning. I'm on day 9 of yoga every morning. I'm focused on, activities and closing my rings on my Apple Watch. I work out 5 times a day. I was lucky enough to buy a Peloton pre-COVID, so I've got this awesome Peloton machine in my thing. So, but the real thing is I'm just trying to keep routines going, build some new routines, and focus on the task at hand. And I think what's unprecedented about this is that we've gone through crises before, whether it's 9/11 or a couple wars, and watching, every night just watching people come home on planes and in coffins, and the heartbreak of that, and the 2008 housing crisis. All these have been economic things. What's really different about this is that the economic impact is very similar to 9/11, but now you have everything is disruptive. So you have I have 3 daughters, as you said, and 2 are graduating seniors this year. I have a graduating senior from college and a graduating senior from high school. And it's heartbreaking to see that their senior years are just getting completely sidetracked, and all that work they've done, they don't get to walk through graduation. They don't get to go to prom. And, now they're home and trying to lead them and keep them motivated. And so the leadership side comes from all facets right now. And quite honestly, there's nothing else for me to do other than to lead. And it's the only thing I know. So I'm just doing what I do. And it's just what I've been leading since my Boy Scouts and running Boy Scout troops, and now I'm leading companies. Now I'm trying to lead my kids through this process and take care of the staff and make decisions, and it's just pretty much what I've been doing, and it's it's just part of my life.
Yes, on one hand, you're basically just a fish in water, that you're doing what you were trained to do, which is lead. You and I were joking before I pressed record, that if this were the zombie apocalypse, neither one of us know how to hunt. We don't know, we don't know how to kill anything, and we would be the first to go. But then I thought about it, and I thought, you would be one of the people leading, and, you could be the Negan of rest, and I'd work on being your lieutenant. But
yeah, the problem is I don't have a bat. I don't even have a
right.
bat. I don't have a weapon. I don't have a fishing pole.
You can have my
I don't
sword.
have a bow and arrow. I don't have a bat. Like I got some work to do to make it through the apocalypse.
But the leadership skills is really something that's tangible, and it's something. So let's start with just being a dad. Like your daughters, their senior years being flushed down the toilet. That's uncertainty, and they don't have a lot of perspective in life. They haven't lived through some of the things that we were talking about to have that perspective of, this is not the end of the world, even though it feels like the end of their world. So you're able to give them perspective.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting. I was on a podcast earlier today, and I started doing some math because I'm an engineer and I'm a minor in mathematics, and what's really interesting is that when I figured out that if you are 40 years old, you have no working memory of 9/11, or if you do, you're just an entry-level person, right? So you really had no leadership, role in that. And if you're 30 years old, you don't even remember the housing crisis of 2008, which to me feels like yesterday. But we've lived through both of these things. And I remember, it's very hard for me to explain to my daughters, one of which was born in 98, and 2000 and 2002, but none of them have any kind of memory of 9/11. And I remember those days, as you do, Mark, that it felt like the world was coming to an end. It really did. And everything just fell apart. The bottom of the economy fell apart. And so we've been through this. We haven't been through a pandemic, but we've been through a lot of what's going on right now. And it's easier for me because it's been 20 years since 9/11, and we've been on a 12-year bull market in the stock market. And I remember people thinking, oh my gosh, the Dow is going to hit, 5,000, the S&P is going to go to 500, and our lives are over. And here we are 20 years later, and we've survived, and we're very resilient people. And Americans are a very resilient society when we put our mind to things. So I have that perspective, but they don't, and that's where I try to work with them. And the other thing I'm really trying to work with them on is for them to take a leadership position too. And I'm lucky in that my girls have always been philanthropic most of their lives in doing things in like junior leagues and national charity leagues, and they've grown up on that. And I guess we'll take some credit for that as parents. But right now they just don't know what to do, as most Americans don't know what to do. And so for me, I look at it and I say, what can we do, right? Mm-hmm. And even the littlest things can help. And so last night, my daughter and I created a Facebook for my my apartment building yesterday. And in 3 hours, 85 residents of, I think, probably 300 units signed on. And now there's communication. No one had thought about that. So my daughter and I worked on that. And then I said, hey, why don't we put together notes and go around to people in our building and slide them on their doors, because we know there's a lot of older people here, in their 70s and 80s in our building that may need help. And let's just slide notes under their doors and put our phone number and say, if you need anything. So, we put together that, and she walked around and slid them under doors. So these are what we just need to do. We can't control what's going on out there. We can't control the spread. I can't control thousands of people going to Clearwater Beach, and I can only control what I can control. And I've decided that my health and safety is paramount, my kids' health. So we're locking things down and then work on how we make other people's lives better.
And you have an elderly mother also, so you're worried about her and pay attention.
Oh, absolutely.
To how she's doing. So it's just all around, like all the plates, all the things, all the bases. But what I love about with what you're doing with your daughters is you're not just talking them through that. Because my 20-year-old son said, this is the first global, this is the first tragedy, this is the first like news thing that he is actually experiencing,
Yeah,
that he's clocking, he's seeing what's going on, and to have those conversations with him. And actually, I'm sequestered away from him, so keeping those communications has been really really difficult. So let's move to the other places where you're a leader. So now you have a couple of companies that you lead. You have
sure.
employees. You have leadership in those organizations. So now how do you shift to crisis mode without being in crisis?
Well, I think it's number one is just to stay calm. And that comes with, again, experience. We've been through this before. Being methodical in what we're doing, we're actually, it's very interesting. So one of the biggest things I'm doing right now is I'm over communicating to my staff. And what I'm doing right now is I'm doing almost daily videos where I just give them a quick update of what's going on. I've cleared my calendar, so I have open office hours from 3 to 4 every single day. I open up a Zoom room and everyone joins, and that's been actually been really fun because
Mm.
now people are jumping on and they're wearing crazy hats and things like that. So and I actually had one guy said today, he goes, I rearranged my calendar so I can be on this call every single day. Right? These are things that may stick after all this too, which is kind of cool. Because out of adversity comes change, and out of change comes innovation, right? And we're being forced to do things. We're being very diligent in our contingency planning. We are very lucky as of today. We've had very little impact to our business. I don't expect that to last. I think that we're kind of in the first wave of 3 waves, and so we are very diligently going through every facet of our businesses right now, looking at what are our plans and overanalyzing every single piece, because what I've told my staff to do is that we have to be in a position where we can make decisions very, very quickly and not have to deal with the emotion of it. And so that's what we're working on right
So,
now. And
so
by
how
the
do
end of the
you
week,
how do you
we'll
even
have a.
communicate that? I got the sentence. We need
Mhm.
to make decisions. We need to make decisions quickly and not get into the emotions of that. Now, what does that mean practically? Like, how? Because you're dealing with humans, you're not dealing with automatrons.
Yeah, well, it's hard, right? So I run a number of companies that are heavily, one is a consulting company, and we've been around for 23 years, right? And so heavy people-oriented business, right? People are our product. So I don't take that statement lightly, because every decision we make affects somebody, but we will be in a position where we may have to make hard decisions, and I would rather go through the motion of deciding things today, so that when we have to make a decision, which may be next week or 3 weeks or a month from now, we've already gone through that emotional process, because for
Mm.
us, it is emotion, right? And I know every single person in my company personally. And if we have to furlough people or lay people off, it's hard. There's nothing easy about that. But I also have an obligation to the company, and I have an obligation to the company as a whole to survive this and be around and be relevant and protect the people that are here. So that really is paramount to me right now, is what do we need to do to make sure that we're making smart decisions, and we've thought through everything and we're not being reactive, and how do we do it in a very quick manner. And that really comes down to preparation, and it means that you're having some hard conversations today that may never come to fruition, hopefully, but you're
So
having
hard
those
conversations of
conversations
what
today.
could happen, so that
Correct.
people can prepare. Hopefully, they don't happen, but what could happen?
Absolutely. And I just saw a video today from the CEO of Marriott, and it was heart wrenching to see what's going on with Marriott, and it's even harder for us, because actually Marriott's one of my clients, and
Mm.
the it's they're being decimated by this, and it's unprecedented, and they're talking about how where the cuts they're making and things like that, and we may be forced into that too. And but for us, it's all about working through this now so that we can make better decisions later if we have to.
So yeah, so let's really talk about it, because I think this is what a lot of people don't understand, and a lot of CEOs are trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Is you are a thinking, feeling person. Your employees, the people who depend on you, you take that to bed every night. Like, you care about these people, and you have to put your oxygen mask on first, that we were talking about. So you have to make these pragmatic decisions. This isn't cut and dry. A lot of people can shut themselves off and go, business is business, and I'm going to take care of business. But to be vulnerable and open and be real, and which I was really kind of blown away in the Marriott video, the CEO of Marriott, just his vulnerability and his realness at the same time of his power and his decisiveness. I thought that was a masterclass in how to communicate. But so how do you not shut yourself off, but still make the pragmatic decisions? How do you show empathy and really navigate this knife's edge of both end?
Well, I think there's a little bit of DNA thrown in there, in that I, or maybe I've taught myself over the years because I've been in business for so long. And one of the things I've always told people who have worked for me and my executives is, don't ride the roller coaster. And the good part of that is that you don't necessarily go as low as everybody else, right? The bad part is sometimes I don't celebrate enough our wins, right?
Sure.
So, but I've gotten to a point where I'm somewhat not as much of a sine wave as other people, and I think some of that's DNA, and some of that's just been being training myself over the years of just trying to stay steady through all this.
How much of that can be taught? So
I think it
is part of
can
it.
be
Part of it
taught.
is your disposition, but
Yeah, because I think back to my early years, I probably was a lot more emotional about things. But also, as you get older and you've seen things, you just go, oh, I kind of seen that before. So, we got through that. I'm not saying that I'm not taking this.
I'm actually not in agreement with that, because I'm watching a lot of seasoned CEOs lose their shit, right? Like,
Well,
they
I can't speak for everybody,
haven't matured as their hair has gotten gray. So
maybe not. And there's a lot of CEOs out there. Look, there's a lot of CEOs in their early 30s, right? And
sure.
I mean, I started my company at 29. These are people who never lived through 9/11, right? And I keep going back to that because to me it's the closest parallel I can see.
I'm still dealing with the fact that you said people who are younger than 40. You said 40 don't remember in their work life 9/11, and I'm still that one's been running around in the back of my head, how long that's been since then.
Yeah. And think about all the things that you've gone through personally. And I know you've gone through a lot, and I've gone through a lot, and we're still here. Right. And up until a couple of weeks ago, we had a pretty good life, and honestly, I still have a good life.
We still, and that, yeah,
my family, my friends, all that. Anyways. So getting back to this, I think that we, the question here really is how do you navigate through this with empathy, right? And to me, I've always one of my greatest accomplishments, I think, is when I think about the success I've had. The thing that comes to top of mind for me personally is the what we've done for the people that work for us, and the hundreds and if not thousands of people that have worked for my companies over the years, and the mortgages we've helped pay, and the college education that we've helped people save for, and I take that really seriously, because it's one of my if I would try to figure out what I'm proud of, that's one thing I'm proud of. And that means that today when I think about this, it's really hard to look at and say, some people may not survive our company, through this. And the best you can do is just be honest with people. You can help them as much as you possibly can, when we went through 9/11, we furloughed people, and I didn't even know what a furlough was at the time, but
Mm.
I learned that if we could furlough people, they could keep their health care, even though we couldn't pay them. And that was really important to me because I didn't want to put more burden on them.
And by
And
the way, that's really, because we have an international audience. Yeah, and everybody knows that's essential in the U.S.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know about other markets, but while I, I think it's a matter of just really putting yourself in those shoes and saying, if I were being let go, like what would I need, and how can we help, and how can we continue to help along the way? And that's really it's a component of every decision we make. Uh, but in the end, we also have to make some hard decisions,
So I
and
really want to tease. I want to tease that out because I've learned. I'm taking a lot from what you're saying, and part of what I hear you saying is when we're talking about empathy, when we're talking about, and I love that you put yourself in their shoes. If I was losing my job, what would I need? It's the leaders of organizations need to be doing their own work. They need to do their own work in order to be able to be out of survival themselves. In order to have empathy, in order to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, you need to feel safe yourself. You need to be able to deal with your own shit, right? So you have to have people you can talk to. You can have people where
Mhm.
you can fall apart for a couple of minutes so you can go have your face. Same thing as being a parent, right? You may just lose your shit somewhere. So you go talk to a friend, then you go deal with your kids, right?
Sure.
So doing your own work, then you can put yourself into your employees' shoes. Then you can talk to them from a mature and loving manner, and that's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I think it's important not only in times like this, but important in general. That they say, oh, you hear the thing, it's lonely at the top. It actually is very lonely at the top, right? Because you don't really have anyone to talk to. And sometimes, I used to belong to a CEO forum, and we had about 18 CEOs in this forum, all from different types of industries. None of them were competitive, right? We had a guy who made windows, compared to what I do is, high tech consulting. But we bonded because we all deal with the same things, and we deal with the people issues and processes and finance issues and things that you can't talk to your staff about because you would freak them out, right? And not having that outlet for you to connect is going to make you being a leader really hard. And in times like this, sometimes you do just need to like get on the phone with somebody and just kind of lose your shit for half an hour, get everything out, and then step back and say, okay, all right, I got that out. Now what do I need to do? How do I move forward? And uh, and 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 how do I start making decisions that are in the best interest of the company and the best interest of my employees? And it's really hard because sometimes those conflict. They do. And that's where we make, that's why we're in these positions, because we're the ones that can make these decisions and try and work through the conflict and you know
Yeah, got it. So, given what I do for a living, a lot of the people that hire me, I'm one of the only people that they can talk to, that they can tell the truth to, that they can hear the truth fed back to them. So that's a really good use of having someone like me in their lives. So let's give some advice. Give some advice to other leaders. Maybe there's a 30-year-old leader who's losing his shit right now over his company and all that. What would you suggest to him in order for him to right his own ship so he can right the ship of his company?
well I so I've had some of my executives come to me in the past, and they would come to me and they'd be frazzled, and I just kind of look at them and I would say, okay. And they say, I don't know how to get all this stuff done. And I'm like, how do you get it? I said, what are you trying to get done? And what I realized that almost every time when they're frazzled and they're kind of freaked out is because they clearly don't know what to do. They're overwhelmed. And when I feel overwhelmed, I sometimes look at my to-do list and there's so much stuff on my list, I don't even know where to start. And you wrote a whole book on this, and you and I have had conversations about this a million times. The only way to get out of being frazzled is to have a plan. right? So these new CEOs who are trying to go through this, I'll just give you a very simple thing. Look at your revenue over the next 12 months, drop 10% of it, and model out what you would do if that happened. Then drop 20% and go through the same process, and drop 40% and go through the same process. And what you're going to find is you're now starting to understand, if X happens, I can start doing Y, right? And start going through every facet. You're going to have to start doing some hard things. Like, you're going to have to start stack ranking your employees, which as leaders, we should be doing all the time anyways, but sometimes we don't,
And then
right?
this
Now
forces
you're
your hand.
forced into, because if you've got to start making some cuts, I mean, what we're doing is we're obviously cutting into our G&A and our overhead as much as possible. But if we have to make staff cuts, we're going to have a stack ranking, right, of value to the organization, and not only value short term, but also value long term, right? And so the best thing to do is just to sit down and go into a quiet room and just start doing the work, right? Because that's the only way you're going to get out of this. And I liken this to, I've had a lot of people come to me over the years, after starting, 5 or 6 companies, saying, "Hey, Sean, I'm starting to start a company. What advice can you give me?" My advice is always this. This is my first advice. Now that you got your business plan done and you're going to rule the world, go get a 6-pack of beer or a bottle of wine, lock yourself in the room, and figure out every possible thing that can go wrong. Because all those things, and probably more, will go wrong. But it's really hard to do that when you're in the euphoria of starting a company and you think that, oh, I got the greatest product in the world. But you got to do the work, right? You got to sit down and you got to figure out, okay, what can go wrong? And that's where we're at right now. Sit down, start thinking, if I lose 10% of my revenue, what happens? Can I pull back on my rent? Can I pull back on some of my vendors? I've got some consultants. Can I let those consultants go? And can I move some staff into do it? Okay, if I lose 20% of my revenue, what can I do? Well, I'm going to do all the things in the 10%, and this is where I go next. Because what you're going to do next is you're going to start putting those onto a timeline. And if you start seeing your business starting to experience some of these things, you can hit those levers now. And if you've already stacked ranked your employees, you've already gone through the emotion of saying, I don't think this person's going to make it. I'd rather keep this person. That's an emotional process, because both of them and they're both good people, right? You've already gone through that process. So now you can just start pulling triggers, right? And you can pull triggers quick. Doesn't mean that the other person, that if you got to lay them off, you got to go through some emotion there, but you would.
You've taken the real brunt of it. You've already dealt with the real brunt of that loss, that fear, the fear of having the conversation and the consequences of not
Correct.
having that person.
Yeah, the fear of that. I will tell you, one of the hardest things that a person, what I have found for myself, is letting go somebody that you really like, right? And I've done it a number of times, and I've let go friends who I hired that I was friends with for 15 years, and I had to let them go after a year because it just didn't work out. It is so hard to do that, and the emotion leading up to that is excruciating. And then as soon as I do it and I walk out of the room, I feel better. So if you can get through that emotion now, when you have to make those decisions, you can get through that decision quicker and move on to the next thing.
Wow. I'll put a plug into that. That's almost every difficult conversation. The turmoil leading up to the conversation.
Oh,
And
it's
then the relief after the conversation you were needed to have anyway, because it almost always turns out better for everybody concerned.
Oh, and it can go on forever. I mean, I'm as bad as anyone, right? I had a senior executive in my organization that I would talk about at my CEO forum for 3 years, and finally they just told me to stop talking about it, because they're like, if you're not going to take our advice and do something about it. And then one day I did something about it, and I felt like, a huge weight off of and I'm sitting there going, why didn't I do that 2 years ago? So we all go through it.
Oh, cool. So let's switch gears again, because what I love is kind of your take on now. Let's just look at the global community. Sure. And your take on the incredibly crazy news cycle, the incredibly crazy political jockeying and what's happening and all the noise. We are being bombarded with so much information, false, true, scary, comforting. We're trying to cherry pick what's going to let our psyche be able to go through the next day, right? And one person will pick, oh, look, all the deaths have gone down, I feel better. The other person is like, oh, we're all going back to work, we're going to kill our old people. Like how are you taking in all this information and staying sane, if you're staying sane?
That's a great question. So I'm a news junkie, and since about 2016, and you can probably do some correlation to what happened in 2016, I have tried very hard to stop watching the news. When this COVID thing started going down, I went into self isolation. I got back on Facebook. I'd actually been on Facebook for a year and a half, and I went back on. And within 20 minutes, I regretted being back on. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just one. It's a time sink. I can't deal with these people's opinions. It's just more contradictory news coming at you. I watch the news at night, and it's a combination of just scariness and world's coming to an end and bashing the government and whether legitimate or not. And then I talk to friends, and they're like, hey, did you read this news report? And I've gotten to the point now where I'm just not reading the news anymore. And here's why. Because there's nothing I can do about it. I can't stop people in Clearwater Beach from going to the beach and infecting and then flying off. I can't stop people from New York flying down to Florida, to hang out with their elderly parents after, being like, I'm just assuming everybody in New York is infected at this point. And my daughter actually lives in Greenwich Village. And I can't get her to come home. So she's dedicated to staying in New York during this crisis. But I just stopped reading the news. And I sign on at night, maybe for 15, 20 minutes, because there's really nothing more I can do about it. I can only control what I can control. And right now I can control the health of myself. I can control the health of my family, my kids. I can put controls in around my company. I can try and help my employees navigate through this, be there for them, whether they need anything, right? And so far we haven't needed a lot, but some emotional support, opening up channels for them to communicate. I can help my neighbors. I can build communication paths with my neighbors who I've never even met before. So I've just decided that I'm going to focus on that and just not spend a whole lot of time watching the news, because I can't make masks, right? I can't make respirators. I don't even know how to do that. There's other people so I'm going to, I focus on things that I can control.
So you get a little bit of news, so you know what's going on that day. Yeah. And then you leave it alone.
Yeah. Because you can get sucked into this stuff and just never come out. And you can hear, people talk about, I just read something the other day, or actually yesterday, someone saying, oh, I know someone has a cure. And part of me just felt so angry that this is being irresponsible for throwing stuff out like that, because they're giving, so I don't want to feel that anymore. I don't want to feel like animosity towards people. I don't want to feel anger. I just want to focus on helping the people that are around me get through this.
Impact what you can impact.
Impact what I can do.
That makes a whole lot of sense to me. Well, Sean, I really appreciate you just bringing your perspective, your maturity, your wisdom, and also your sense of humor. We didn't get into some of that but the likening this to the zombie apocalypse is there's just too many parallels.
I think I'm going to go on Amazon and buy a Louisville Slugger tonight. So you gave me some good ideas there.
All right, man. That's cool. So I want you to talk about your foundation.
Sure.
So we can get just people understanding what you care about outside of the business world and what you're doing. Tell us about Windward Foundation.
Yeah, the Windward Foundation, we're actually rebranding as the Alzheimer's Caregiver Alliance. So the the genesis of this is that my father passed away of Alzheimer's in 2013. My grandmother passed away of it when I was in college. She actually lived with us so I went through this twice. And it's a devastating disease. It's heartbreaking, and it's a whole process. It's a journey, from the moment you suspect someone has it to the point once they're diagnosed, through the whole process until eventually they die. And that, unfortunately, there really is only one scenario here. There is no cure. But during that whole process, my sister and my sister really took the brunt of my dad's illness. We came to appreciate the impact of the caregiver. And part of this is my mom, who's 86 now, but probably in her late 70s when my dad was diagnosed. The impact on her and everything she had to do every day, and the calls I would get from her, sometimes crying, which was heartbreaking for me because I don't ever remember my mom crying about anything. And or when we finally moved my father into a memory unit, and the people who came in there, every shift and worked with my parents they're not even family members, and they're dedicating their lives to caring for people. It really struck both my sister and I that the caregivers are really the unsung heroes here. And so we stepped back and said, how can we help? And we started out, engaging with some of the major Alzheimer's charities in the U.S., and we created Windward Foundation really as a way to use some of the profits from Windward to fund programs and other charities. But what we realized after a couple of years, we started a foundation in 2016, is that none of them were really focused on the caregiver. They're focused on research, they're focused on advocacy, they're focused on legislation, and all that stuff is super important. But the caregivers are being left behind, and they're the silent heroes. They're not heard of because they're so busy at home, and nobody's really thinking about them. So we pivoted our foundation in 2017-18 to exclusively focus on the caregiver, hence the rebranding, the Alzheimer's Caregiver Alliance. And so we're running and we're building our programs directly now to the caregiver, whether it's working with caregivers on respite to help with getting a break from the daily grind, to helping fund memory cafes where they can take their loved ones and interact with other people, to support groups where caregivers can get together. We just did a really cool, my sister led it. My sister's the executive director, Michelle Darwin, and she just did a really cool campaign where they built boxes and sent them out to caregivers around the country, caregiver boxes, and the reception's been phenomenal.
I bet.
And so that's really what we're doing. And in this time and age right now, it's even this environment right now is even more stressful, right? Because now they can't get out. They can't go to the memory cafes. The memory cafes are closed down, no physical contact. And
the physical contact of the caregivers, like, it's scary to go in, because these people are elderly. So you go out in the world, and then
they're the highest risk people, right? And you've got elderly people taking care of elderly people, and they're all higher risk. So we're pivoting right now. We're actually working on building virtual memory cafes, and we just in the last 48 hours we've been testing that out, and we've got a couple memory cafes here in the Washington D.C. area that we're going to start doing virtual. Again, this is what I'm an optimist, right? And you and I have known each other for a while. I think when we first met, that's one of the first things I said is, I'm an optimist. I think that while this is a trying time, this could actually unlock a lot of really cool things for us in the future. And the foundation is a really good example of that. The ability for us to now be forced into doing virtual support and virtual memory cafes and virtual respite. We were forced into this, right? But I'm looking at it now like this actually may be a huge part of our strategy going
revelation
forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and how do we make technology easy for people who don't work with technology really well, right? And taking out some of the friction of things like that to allow people to connect. So I'm actually I'm actually excited about where we're going with the foundation right now, and the innovation that's going to come out of this over the next 6 months.
Oh, incredible. In fact, I interviewed your sister, Michelle, on
You
the
did.
show, and it's one of my highest rated shows because so many people are dealing with, she talked about caregiving in general.
Sure.
She talked about the foundation, but just, what people need and the resources for caregivers. So I will put that in your show notes so that when
Good.
people go to the webpage for this show, they can
Mhm.
go listen to your sister talk about this because she's
Yeah,
such a brilliant lady.
sign on to the foundation. Just sign up for our newsletter. We're It's free, and one of the things that we're going to be doing in 2020 is rolling out more online training videos and things like that. So we're in the process right now of building our content repository so that we can reach more people through. And I'm a technologist, so it's a good team where I've got my sister, who is probably the most empathetic person I know on this planet, teamed up with me, that I love technology. So I'm trying to figure out how to apply technology and to channel her empathy through. So it's exciting stuff. And this is probably, I love what I do. I love the companies I've started. I'm a creator. I like creating things. The foundation is got just a very special place in my heart, and it's something I'm really proud of, and it's something I will be working on till the day they put me in the ground.
Well, hopefully that's a long time from now. So Sean, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing everything that you did, and again, and your impact in the world.
Thank
So
you.
stay
Appreciate it.
safe, stay healthy, and to everybody else, I just appreciate you spending this time with us. Usually I sign up and say, thank you for being in your car or whatever and listening, and that's just probably not going to be happening for the next month or two. But I appreciate you listening all the way to the end. Stay healthy, stay sane. I love you, and have a great rest of the day.